The porch boards creaked beneath the weight of memory. Clara Brennan sat in her rocking chair, worn hands folded over a gold locket that had rested against her heart for 50 years. The Colorado autumn painted the mountains in fire and gold, the same colors that had welcomed her to this valley a lifetime ago. Beside her, 8-year-old Lucy pressed close, tears still wet on her cheeks. The child's left leg, twisted since birth, jutted at an awkward angle beneath her dress. She had run home from school crying, and Clara knew why without asking. The words followed children like Lucy everywhere. Cripple, gimp, broken. Clara had heard them all. "Grandma Clara," Lucy whispered, voice small and wounded. "Why did God make me wrong?" The old woman's chest tightened. She had asked her own mother that same question 70 years ago. The answer then had been cruel, wrapped in scripture and shame. Clara would not pass that poison to another generation. "Let me tell you a story, sweetheart." Clara's voice carried the texture of weathered leather, soft but unbreakable. "About a girl nobody wanted. Not her family in the city, not the shopkeepers who turned her away, not the men who looked through her like she was invisible." Lucy wiped her eyes, listening. But on a rain-soaked April evening in 1875, a cowboy looked at that girl and saw something nobody else could see. Clara touched the locket. He saw her heart, and that changed everything. The afternoon light shifted, and in Clara's memory, 50 years dissolved like morning mist. April 15th, 1875. The storm arrived with biblical fury. Clara Hayes huddled beneath the narrow overhang of Morrison's general store, clutching her threadbare shawl against the wind. Rain hammered the dirt street, transforming it into a river of mud that would make walking nearly impossible. Walking was already difficult enough. She pressed her back against the rough planks, feeling the old familiar ache radiating from her twisted left leg. Born wrong, her mother had said, a punishment from God for sins Clara couldn't name. 22 years of that burden, 22 years of sideways glances and whispered pity. The money sewn into her petticoat represented 3 years of work, $47.50. Every penny earned by lamplight, stitching dresses for St. Louis women who wouldn't meet her eyes. Women who paid her less because they knew she had nowhere else to go. Silverton was supposed to be different. Her cousin Martha had written about opportunities in the Colorado mining towns, about a place where hard workers could build new lives. What Martha hadn't mentioned was whether crippled girls were welcome. "You best get inside before you catch your death." The voice belonged to Mr. Morrison, an elderly man with kind eyes who stood in the doorway of his store. He'd been watching her for the past hour, probably wondering if she had money to spend or just needed charity. "Thank you, sir, but I haven't money for a room just yet." Clara forced her voice to stay steady, her spine straight despite the exhaustion that pulled at her bones. "I've come seeking work. My cousin mentioned there might be opportunities here." Morrison's expression shifted to something Clara despised more than cruelty: pity. "Work's hard to come by for a young woman in these parts." His gaze drifted to her leg, then quickly away. "Especially for someone who walks with a limp," Clara finished, her voice sharper than intended. "I'm aware of my condition, Mr. Morrison, but I can cook better than most restaurant chefs. I can clean, mend, read and write better than the school teacher in any town from here to Missouri. I just need someone willing to look past what everyone sees first." Morrison had the decency to look ashamed. Before he could respond, the thunder of hooves cut through the rain. 3 riders emerged from the gray curtain of the storm, their horses massive and dark against the churning sky. The lead rider reined his mount directly before the store. Even through the rain, Clara could see he was tall and broad-shouldered, his duster slick with water. He dismounted with the fluid grace of a man born to the saddle, moving with an economy that spoke of strength held in careful reserve. When he stepped onto the porch and removed his hat, Clara's breath caught. Water streamed from dark hair that fell nearly to his collar. His face carried the weathering of sun and wind, lines etched around eyes of startling blue. Those eyes met hers for just a moment, and Clara felt something shift in her chest. He didn't look at her leg. He looked at her face. "Mr. Morrison," the man said, his voice deep and measured. "Got those supplies ready? We need to head back to Iron Creek before this gets any worse." "Just finishing up, Mr. Brennan. Come in out of that rain." Brennan, Clara filed the name away. She watched as he stepped fully onto the porch, noticed how he moved to give her more room without making it obvious. Most men either crowded too close, asserting dominance, or gave her exaggerated space, as if disability might be contagious. This man simply made room with quiet courtesy. "Lucas Brennan," he said, offering a nod instead of his rain-soaked hand. Behind him, the two other riders waited in the downpour, patient as stone. "Clara Hayes." She forced herself to meet his eyes, fighting the instinct to hide her leg behind her skirts. His gaze never wavered from her face. "You're new to Silverton." It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. "Just arrived today, on foot from the rail station." That was 8 miles in the mud. She saw understanding flicker in his eyes, quickly masked. He knew what that walk had cost her. Morrison emerged with parcels wrapped in oilcloth. "Mr. Brennan, this young lady's looking for work. Says she can cook and such." Lucas Brennan studied her with an intensity that had made Clara's heart quicken. Not the examining stare she was used to, cataloging her defects. This was different. He was seeing something, though Clara couldn't imagine what. "We lost our cook last month," he said finally. "Moved east to get married. Ranch work is hard. Days start before dawn and end long after dark." Clara lifted her chin. "I'm no stranger to hard work, Mr. Brennan, and I don't expect special treatment." Something that might have been a smile touched his lips, there and gone like sunlight through clouds. "Didn't think you would." He turned to secure the packages to his saddle. Movements practiced and efficient. The rain intensified, drumming against the overhang with renewed violence. When he faced her again, his expression was unreadable. "Storm's getting worse. You got somewhere to stay tonight?" Clara hesitated. Pride demanded she claim to have arrangements, but lies had a way of catching up with you. Before she could form an answer, Lucas spoke to his companions. "Johnson, Riley, head back and tell Mrs. Fletcher we've got a potential cook coming. I'll bring Miss Hayes along." "Mr. Brennan, I haven't agreed to anything yet," Clara protested, though the alternative was spending the night huddled in Morrison's store if he'd even allow it. "True enough," Lucas retrieved a gentler-looking mare from Riley, "but you need shelter tonight, and we need a cook. Seems like a fair arrangement for now." He studied the horse, then Clara. "Can you ride?" Clara swallowed. "Not well, and with my leg, You'll ride with me then." Before she could object, he'd gathered her meager carpet bag and secured it to the mare. Then, with surprising gentleness, he helped her mount his own horse before swinging up behind her. His arms came around her to take the reins, and Clara found herself pressed against the solid warmth of his chest. "Hold tight," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. They rode into the storm, leaving Silverton behind. Clara clutched the saddle horn with both hands, acutely aware of every place their bodies touched. No man had been this close to her since she was a child, and never with this strange mixture of propriety and intimacy. Lucas said little as they rode. Occasionally he'd comment on a landmark, his voice barely audible above the rain. "That ridge marks the northern boundary of Iron Creek Ranch. Been in my family 20 years. Or, creek floods most springs, but the house sits high enough to stay dry." Clara absorbed every word, trying to build a picture of the place that might become her home, if she could convince them to keep her. If they could look past what everyone else saw first. The storm began to ease as they climbed into the foothills. The clouds broke apart, revealing glimpses of mountains still capped with snow despite the advancing spring. The air smelled of pine and wet earth, so different from the coal smoke and crowded streets of St. Louis. "There," Lucas said, and Clara followed his gaze. The ranch sprawled across a verdant valley, perhaps 15 miles from Silverton. The main house was larger than she'd expected, a 2-story structure of sturdy logs with a wide porch wrapping 3 sides. Smoke curled from a stone chimney, promising warmth. Several outbuildings dotted the property, and a large corral held at least a dozen horses. "Iron Creek Ranch," Lucas said, something like pride warming his voice. "My father built the house in I was 12 then. My brother, Ethan, was just 4. "It's beautiful," Clara said honestly. After the cramped boarding house in St. Louis, after years of living on sufferance in her cousin's crowded home, this open space took her breath away. Lucas dismounted first, then reached up to help her down. His hands spanned her waist, and for a moment he held her suspended before carefully lowering her to the ground. Clara winced slightly as her bad leg took her weight, the long ride having stiffened it further. "We'll get you settled inside," he said, noticing her discomfort, but mercifully saying nothing more about it. A woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on an apron. She appeared to be in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a severe bun. Her eyes were sharp, missing nothing, the gaze of someone who'd run a household with military precision for decades. "Mrs. Fletcher," Lucas called. "This is Miss Hayes. She might be our new cook." Mrs. Fletcher's shrewd eyes assessed Clara in one sweeping glance, lingering for just a moment on her leg before meeting her gaze. "Can you make a decent stew, girl?" "Yes, ma'am, and bread, pies, roasts, stews, and just about anything else you might want." The housekeeper's mouth twitched in what might have been approval. "We'll see about that. Come along, then." Clara gathered her skirts and followed, trying not to favor her leg too obviously. Inside, the house was unexpectedly refined. Polished wood floors gleamed in the lamplight. Comfortable furniture filled the main room, and shelves lined with books stood against one wall. A staircase curved up to the second floor. "Kitchen's through here," Mrs. Fletcher said, leading the way. "You'll be cooking for Mr. Brennan, his brother Ethan, and about 10 ranch hands, depending on the season. Breakfast at dawn, dinner at noon, supper at 6 o'clock. You'll have Sundays to yourself mostly." The kitchen was spacious and well-equipped. A massive cast-iron stove dominated one wall, the kind that took skill to manage properly. A pump stood at the sink, miracle of modern convenience. Ample counter space, copper pots hanging from hooks, shelves stocked with dry goods. Clara ran her hand along the smooth countertop, already imagining the meals she could prepare here. After years of cooking in cramped, poorly equipped kitchens, this felt like a cathedral. "Your room's off the kitchen," Mrs. Fletcher continued, opening a door to reveal a small but tidy space. A narrow bed with a quilt, a chest of drawers, a window that looked out toward the mountains. Simple, clean, private. "It's perfect," Clara said, genuinely pleased. After sharing a room with 3 cousins in St. Louis, having her own space seemed almost luxurious. "Wages are $20 a month plus room and board," Lucas said from the doorway where he'd been quietly observing. "If that suits you." It was more than Clara had dared hope for. In St. Louis, she'd earned $15 monthly as a seamstress, and that was considered generous for a woman with her disadvantage. "It suits me very well, Mr. Brennan." "Good." He nodded once decisively. "We'll try it for a month. See how it works out for both of us." After he left, Mrs. Fletcher helped Clara unpack her few belongings. 1 dress for Sundays, 2 work dresses, a nightgown, undergarments, her mother's tortoiseshell comb, and a journal where Clara recorded her thoughts in careful script. "Mr. Brennan's a fair employer," Mrs. Fletcher said, as she demonstrated how to regulate the temperamental stove. "Expects hard work, but treats his people right. Pays on time, doesn't short wages, and he'll sit down to meals with the hands instead of taking them alone." "And his brother?" Clara asked. Mrs. Fletcher's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Ethan's different. Younger. Got a wild streak in him. Good-hearted but restless. Just mind yourself around him." Before Clara could inquire further, the back door swung open. Several ranch hands filed in, drawn by the promise of the evening meal. Mrs. Fletcher had prepared a simple supper earlier, and the men helped themselves, eyeing Clara with curiosity but maintaining respectful distance. "This here's Miss Hayes," Mrs. Fletcher announced. "She'll be taking over the cooking starting tomorrow. You lot mind your manners." A chorus of nods and mumbled greetings followed. Clara smiled nervously, noting their sun-darkened faces and calloused hands. These were working men, unaccustomed to gentleness but not unkind. They cared whether she could fill their bellies, not whether her legs matched. That night, alone in her new room, Clara wrote in her journal by lamplight. April 15, 1875. "I have found employment at Iron Creek Ranch. The owner, Mr. Lucas Brennan, seems fair if somewhat reserved. The accommodations exceed anything I dared hope for. Perhaps here, where everyone works hard for their place, I might finally find somewhere I belong." She closed the journal and extinguished the lamp, listening to unfamiliar sounds. The creak of the house settling, distant lowing of cattle, The whisper of wind through pine trees. For the first time in months, she fell asleep without the gnawing anxiety that had become her constant companion. Morning arrived with cruel efficiency. Clara woke to Mrs. Fletcher's brisk knock, the sky outside her window barely lightening to gray. Despite exhaustion that pulled at her bones, she dressed quickly. The proximity of her room to the kitchen meant minimal walking before she'd had time to work the stiffness from her leg, a consideration she suspected hadn't been accidental. "Men will be in soon," Mrs. Fletcher said by way of greeting. "Coffee's brewing. They'll want eggs, bacon, biscuits, and potatoes. Think you can manage?" "Absolutely." For the next hour, Clara worked steadily, finding rhythm in the well-organized kitchen. By the time Boots stomped on the porch outside, she had platters of food ready and biscuits browning in the oven, filling the house with the yeast and butter scent of fresh bread. The ranch hands filed in, mumbling good mornings as they helped themselves to coffee. Lucas entered last, his hair damp from washing, shirt sleeves rolled to reveal muscular forearms marked with old scars. He nodded to Clara, his expression unreadable, then took his place at the head of the long table. "Smells good," he said simply as she placed a plate before him. The meal passed in a blur of activity. Clara served, refilled coffee cups, pulled fresh biscuits from the oven. The kitchen's layout allowed her to minimize movement while keeping everything within reach. Another small mercy, she noted with gratitude. As the men finished and headed out to begin their day's work, Lucas lingered at the table, cradling his coffee cup. When they were alone, he spoke without looking directly at her. "Everything satisfactory?" "Yes, thank you," Clara replied, gathering dishes. "Everyone's been very kind." He watched her work for a moment, and Clara felt the weight of his gaze. Most people studied her leg when they thought she wasn't looking. Lucas seemed to be watching her hands, her face, the efficient way she moved through the space. "Your leg," he said abruptly. "Does it pain you much?" The directness startled her. Most people pretended not to notice or avoided the subject with elaborate courtesy. Clara set down the plates, considering her answer. "Some days worse than others," she said honestly. "Rain makes it ache. Standing too long as well. But I've learned to manage." Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "There's a stool by the pantry. Use it when you need to. No sense suffering needlessly." Before she could respond, the back door banged open. A young man strode in, resembling Lucas enough to clearly be his brother. But where Lucas's features were weathered and serious, this man's face held boyish charm and an easy smile. "So it's true," he exclaimed, grinning at Clara. "We have a new cook, and a pretty one at that." He swept an exaggerated bow. "Ethan Brennan, at your service, Miss Hayes." "Clara," she replied, unable to help returning his smile despite herself. "Miss Hayes to you," Lucas corrected, his tone sharper than Clara had yet heard from him. "And where have you been? We had fences to mend at dawn." Ethan waved a dismissive hand. Checking on the new foal, Mayor was having trouble. He turned his attention back to Clara, his charm turned up like a lamp wick. "Any chance there's breakfast left for a starving man?" "Of course," Clara said, already moving to prepare a plate. Lucas stood, his chair scraping against the floor with more force than necessary. "When you're done eating, saddle up. We've got work." He nodded once to Clara and left, his stride purposeful, carrying tension in his shoulders. Ethan rolled his eyes dramatically. "Don't mind on my brother. He was born serious. Came out of the womb frowning, probably." "He seems dedicated," Clara offered, setting a full plate before him. "That's one word for it." Ethan dug into his food with enthusiasm. Between bites, he asked, "So what brings you to Silverton? Not exactly a place people just happen upon." Clara busied herself with dishes, considering how much to share. "My parents died when I was 16. Influenza took them both within a week of each other. I lived with my cousin's family in St. Louis after that, but it wasn't ideal. My cousin Martha mentioned Silverton was growing, thought I might find work here. Well, their loss is our gain." Ethan's easy compliment warmed her, though Clara had learned long ago not to trust charm too readily. In her experience, those quick with flattery often had the shallowest intentions. "Thank you, Mr. Brennan, but I suspect you'd say that about any meal you didn't have to cook yourself." Ethan laughed, a rich sound that filled the kitchen. "You've got me there. And please, call me Ethan. Mr. Brennan is my brother, and he's already stern enough without encouraging formality. I don't think your brother would approve. All the more reason to do it, Ethan said with a wink. He rose from the table, bringing his empty plate to the wash basin instead of leaving it for her. But I should go before Lucas comes looking with that expression that means he's counting all my character flaws. After he left, Mrs. Fletcher returned to help with cleaning. I see you've met the younger Mr. Brennan. He seems very different from his brother. Like night and day, those two. Mrs. Fletcher scrubbed a pot with vigorous efficiency. Lucas was forced to grow up fast after their parents died. Took over the ranch at 23, raised Ethan from a boy of 14. Sometimes I think he forgot to have a youth of his own. The information gave Clara a new perspective on Lucas's reserved manner. She understood responsibility that came too young, dreams deferred for duty. How old is he now? 32 this past winter. Ethan's 24. Mrs. Fletcher gave her a knowing look. Neither one married, if you're wondering. Heat rose in Clara's cheeks. I wasn't. I mean, it's not my business to. No need to fib, girl. It's natural to be curious. The housekeeper smiled slightly. Now let's talk about what you'll need for dinner. The men work hard and they eat accordingly. The following days established a pattern. Clara rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, spent the morning baking bread and preparing dinner, served the midday meal, then began preparations for supper. Despite the long hours, she found satisfaction in the work. The kitchen became her domain, a place where her leg mattered less than her skill with flour and butter. Lucas remained politely distant, speaking to her mainly about practical matters, supplies needed from town, the number of men to feed, preferences for certain dishes. Yet Clara often caught him watching her when he thought she wouldn't notice, his expression unreadable but intent. Ethan, by contrast, made a point of seeking her out. He'd linger after meals, telling stories that made her laugh, or bring wildflowers he claimed to have just happened upon during his rides. His attention was flattering, though Clara maintained careful reserve. She'd learned early that men might flirt with the limping girl, but they rarely meant anything serious by it. A week into her employment, Clara was kneading bread dough when Lucas entered through the back door. He carried a wooden object she couldn't immediately identify, his expression oddly uncertain. "Miss Hayes," he said, nodding in greeting. "Got a moment?" "Of course, Mr. Brennan." She wiped flour from her hands onto her apron. He placed the object on the table, a three-legged stool, but unlike the simple milking stool already in the kitchen, this one had a padded leather seat and a polished finish. The craftsmanship was obvious, each joint fitted with precision. "Noticed you were using that old stool when your leg troubles you," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Thought this might be more comfortable. Had it in the storeroom." Clara stared at the stool, then at Lucas. The lie was transparent. This wasn't something pulled from storage. Someone had made it recently, the wood still carrying the scent of fresh oil. Someone who'd noticed her discomfort and spent his evenings building a solution. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice catching. "That's very kind." He shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. "Just practical. Need our cook in good working order." Before she could respond, he turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "The apple pie yesterday, it was good. Best I've had since my mother's." Then he was gone, leaving Clara staring after him. A strange warmth spread through her chest, having nothing to do with the heat of the stove. She sat on the new stool, testing it. The height was perfect, the padding firm but comfortable. He'd built this specifically for her, measuring without her knowledge, adjusting to her exact needs. Actions, not words. That was Lucas Brennan's language. That evening, as she served supper, Clara found herself more aware of Lucas's presence than before. He sat at the head of the table as always, speaking little but listening intently to his men's reports on the day's work. There was quiet authority in his manner, confidence without arrogance. Ethan dominated the conversation, telling tales of a wild stallion he had spotted in the north pasture. Beautiful creature, black as midnight, with a white star on his forehead. "I'm going to catch him." "That stallion's been running these hills for years," one of the older hands commented. "Many have tried, none succeeded." "None of them were me," Ethan replied with characteristic bravado. Lucas shook his head slightly. "We have plenty of horses that need attention without chasing wild ones through the mountains." Where's your sense of adventure, brother? Ethan's tone was light, but Clara detected an undercurrent of tension. Not everything's about practicality. Adventure doesn't keep the ranch running, Lucas replied evenly, or pay the men. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Clara quickly intervened, bringing out a berry cobbler that drew appreciative murmurs and effectively changed the subject. Later, as she washed dishes, she heard boots on the porch. Looking up, she found Lucas leaning against the doorframe watching her. You shouldn't have to work this late, he said. I don't mind. It's peaceful after the day's bustle. She dried her hands on a towel. Was everything to your liking? More than satisfactory. He entered the kitchen fully, moving to stand near the stove where coffee still kept warm. May I? Please, help yourself. He poured a cup, then after a moment's hesitation gestured to the table. Would you join me if you're not too tired? Surprised, Clara nodded and took a seat. Lucas poured a second cup and placed it before her before sitting across the table. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence comfortable rather than awkward. Mrs. Fletcher speaks highly of your work, Lucas said finally, turning his cup slowly between his hands. She's been very helpful in showing me how things are done here. And how are you finding Iron Creek? He looked up, his blue eyes direct and searching. It's wonderful, Claire answered honestly. I've never lived somewhere so beautiful. Every morning when I wake and see those mountains through my window, I can hardly believe this is real. It grows on you. A small smile softened his features, transforming his face in a way that made Clara's heart skip. My father brought us here when I was 12. Ethan was just 4. It was wilderness then. Took years to build it into what you see now. You must be very proud of what you've accomplished. His eyes met hers, intense and measuring. I am. This land, it gets in your blood, becomes part of you. He paused. Your family, there in St. Louis, are they still living? Clara looked down at her cup. I have cousins there, but we're not close. My parents died of influenza when I was 16. After that, I was more of a burden than family to my relatives. Because of your leg? The blunt question didn't offend her, coming from him. It was simply Lucas's way, direct without being cruel. Partly, she admitted, and partly because I was another mouth to feed. My cousin Martha took me in, but it was clear I wasn't welcome. I worked as a seamstress, gave most of my earnings to help with expenses, but it was never enough. She shrugged, trying to appear unconcerned, though the memory still stung. When Martha mentioned Silverton was growing, I saved every penny until I had enough for the journey. I needed to make my own way. Lucas's jaw tightened. Some people lack common decency. They had their own troubles, Clara said, though she appreciated his indignation on her behalf. But when the opportunity came, I knew I had to take it, even if it meant traveling 800 miles to a place I'd never seen, to people who might not want me. That takes courage, Lucas said quietly. Or desperation, she replied with a small smile. They talked for nearly an hour, the conversation flowing more easily than Clara would have expected. Lucas spoke of the challenges of ranching in the high country, the harsh winters that could kill cattle, the dry summers that tested their water supply. He described his plans for expanding their herd, improving the bloodlines of their horses, perhaps eventually supplying the army with remounts. Though he spoke modestly, Clara could hear the pride and passion in his voice. This ranch wasn't just his livelihood. It was his identity, his purpose, the dream he'd chosen when other dreams became impossible. When he finally rose to leave, Lucas hesitated as if wanting to say something more. Instead, he simply nodded. Thank you for the coffee, Miss Hayes, and the conversation. You're welcome, Mr. Brennan, any time. After he left, Clara remained at the table, reflecting on their conversation. Lucas Brennan was not what she'd initially thought, not simply stern and reserved, but thoughtful, intelligent, and deeply committed to his responsibilities. And, she admitted to herself, more handsome than she'd allowed herself to notice, especially when that rare smile transformed his weathered face. But such thoughts were dangerous. A man like Lucas would want a whole woman, someone who could be a proper rancher's wife, working alongside him without limitation. And regardless of his kindness toward her, she'd seen no indication that he viewed her as anything more than a capable employee. Still, as she readied for bed that night, Clara found herself humming a tune her mother used to sing, something she hadn't done in years. 2 weeks passed in steady routine. Clara settled into the rhythm of ranch life, her confidence growing with each successful meal. The hands complimented her cooking, Mrs. Fletcher nodded approval, and the kitchen truly felt like her domain now. But something was wrong. She noticed it in small ways at first. Lucas standing at his office window, staring at nothing. Ethan and Lucas's conversations ending abruptly when she entered a room. A tension that hadn't been there before, strung tight between the brothers like fence wire. One evening, Clara carried coffee to Lucas's office, intending to ask about supplies for the following week. The door stood slightly ajar, and she heard voices within. She should have knocked, should have announced her presence. Instead, she froze at the threshold, arrested by the anguish in Lucas's voice. "We can sell the north pasture to Caldwell," Ethan was saying. "She's offering $1,500. That land has Iron Creek running through it." Lucas's voice was flat, exhausted. "Without water access, we lose everything. The cattle can't survive on the South Range alone." "Then what? The bank won't wait forever." "I'll find a way. I always do." Clara's hand trembled, coffee sloshing in the cup. She backed away quietly, her heart pounding. Back in the kitchen, she set down the tray and pressed her hands flat against the counter, trying to steady herself. The next day, she found an excuse to visit Morrison's store in town. While pretending to examine fabric, she listened to the gossip flowing around her. Women love to talk, especially about other people's troubles. "Shame about the Brennan place," one woman said. "Heard the bank's calling in their note." $2,000 by mid-July, another replied. "Where's a rancher going to find that kind of money?" "Not with cattle prices, what they are. Margaret Caldwell will end up with that land, mark my words. She's been after it for years." Clara's stomach clenched. $2,000. An impossible sum. She earned $20 monthly. Even if she gave Lucas every penny, it wouldn't make a difference. That evening, she started taking in sewing. She told Mrs. Fletcher she was just keeping her skills sharp. But in truth, she worked late into the night, mending, altering, creating. $2 here, $3 there. In 3 weeks, she saved $47. It was nothing, less than nothing against a $2,000 debt. But it was all she had to give. Lucas found her working one night, the lamp burning low, her eyes strained from close work. She hadn't heard him enter, too focused on the tiny stitches marching across white fabric. "Clara!" His voice made her jump. He never used her Christian name. "What are you doing?" She set down the needle, too tired to dissemble. "Trying to help." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something that looked like pain. "You know about the debt?" "I overheard. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to eavesdrop." Lucas pulled out a chair and sat heavily. For a moment, he looked older than his 32 years, burdened by responsibilities that would break lesser men. "You can't save the ranch, Clara, not with sewing." "I have to try." Her voice broke despite her efforts to keep it steady. "You gave me a home when no one else would. You see me, truly see me, not just what's wrong with me. If I lose you, if you lose this place..." She couldn't finish. Saying it aloud made it too real, too close. Lucas reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and solid. "This isn't your burden to carry." "Then whose is it?" Clara met his eyes. "You carry everyone else's burdens, your brother, your men. This whole valley depends on you. Who carries yours?" For a long moment, Lucas simply held her hand, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "I don't deserve you." "You deserve everything good in this world, Lucas Brennan. And I'll fight for you, even if all I have to fight with is a needle and thread." He squeezed her hand once, then released it and stood. "Get some rest. You work too hard as it is." After he left, Clara stared at her hand, still feeling the warmth of his touch. She was falling in love with him. The realization should have frightened her, but instead, it felt inevitable, as natural as water flowing downhill. She loved a man who might lose everything. A man too honorable to burden her with his troubles. A man who would never look at a crippled cook and see a future wife. But love wasn't something you chose. It simply was. Sunday morning arrived with perfect spring weather. Lucas appeared at the kitchen door, while Clara prepared a light breakfast, hat in his hands, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. There's a church social in town today, he said. I wondered if you might like to attend. With me. Clara's heart jumped into her throat. Are you certain? I mean, people might see me with a remarkable woman who makes the best apple pie in Colorado territory. His blue eyes held hers. If you're willing to be seen with a rancher facing foreclosure, Lucas Brennan, you could be flat broke and living in a tent, and I'd still be honored to be seen with you. His smile was like sunrise. Then get your Sunday dress, Miss Hayes. We're going courting. The word sent electricity through Clara's body. Courting. He'd said it plainly, making his intentions clear. She wore the blue dress Mrs. Fletcher had altered for her and pinned her hair up with her mother's tortoiseshell comb. When she emerged from her room, Lucas was waiting. The way he looked at her, like she was something precious and unexpected, made her believe for the first time that maybe, just maybe, she could be enough. Silverton was transformed for the social. Bunting decorated the main street. Tables laden with food lined the area in front of the church. A small band played cheerful music while children darted between the adult legs, shrieking with laughter. Lucas helped Clara down from the buggy, his hand lingering at her waist. As they walked toward the gathering, Clara felt eyes turning their way. Whispers started, rippling through the crowd like wind through wheat. Most faces showed curiosity, some surprise. A few women smiled and nodded. But Clara also saw disapproval, judgment, speculation. She forced herself to walk naturally, head high, refusing to let shame dictate her steps. Lucas must have felt her tension because his arm tightened around hers. You're doing fine, he murmured. Just fine. He introduced her to everyone they passed, the banker and his wife, the blacksmith and his family, the school teacher. Most were polite, even welcoming. Several women expressed admiration for her taking on the cooking for a ranch crew. Lucas hasn't brought anyone to a social in years, the banker's wife confided. You must be very special indeed. Then Clara saw her. Margaret Caldwell. She was perhaps 45, handsome rather than beautiful, dressed in expensive fabric that stood out among the simpler clothes of working families. She stood surrounded by a cluster of town matrons, holding court like a queen among her subjects. When Margaret's eyes landed on Lucas and Clara, her expression hardened. She said something to the women around her, and they all turned to stare. Lucas noticed. His jaw tightened, but he steered Clara toward the food tables, maintaining pleasant conversation as if nothing was wrong. They were filling plates when Margaret approached. Her smile was cold, calculated. Mr. Brennan, surely you're not seriously courting this unfortunate girl? The words rang out across the gathering, loud enough to turn heads. Conversations faltered and died. Clara felt every eye in Silverton fix on her, felt the old shame rising like floodwater. Margaret continued, her voice dripping false concern. When you lose Iron Creek, and you will, you'll need a woman of means, not a crippled burden who'll drain what little resources you have left. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't move. This was her nightmare made manifest, her deepest fears spoken aloud in front of everyone. Then Lucas stepped forward. His movement was deliberate, controlled, but Clara felt the fury radiating from him like heat from a forge. He positioned himself between Margaret and Clara, his body a shield. When he spoke, his voice carried across the silent gathering, cold as winter wind. Mrs. Caldwell, you own half this town. You have money, property, social position, but you lack the one thing Miss Hayes has in abundance. He paused, letting the moment stretch. Decency. Gasps rippled through the crowd. One did not speak to Margaret Caldwell this way. Lucas continued, each word deliberate and cutting. Miss Hayes has more courage in her little finger than you've shown in your entire life. She came here with nothing, asked for no charity, and has earned every kindness shown to her through hard work and genuine character. His voice rose slightly, ensuring everyone heard. She walked 8 miles through mud on an injured leg rather than beg for help. She works 15-hour days without complaint. She saved $47 by sewing through the night, trying to help save a ranch that isn't even hers. Margaret's face was flushing red, but Lucas wasn't finished. You measure worth by bank accounts and flawless legs. But the only thing broken here is your heart, Margaret. And all your money can't fix that. He turned to Clara, his expression softening completely. He held out his arm. Clara, we're leaving. We don't belong among people who confuse wealth with worth. Clara took his arm with a hand that trembled only slightly. They walked through the crowd together, heads high. No one spoke. No one moved. Only when they reached the buggy did Clara's composure break. She pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting tears that weren't all from humiliation. Some were from pure, overwhelming gratitude. Lucas helped her up, then climbed beside her. He didn't start the horses immediately. Instead, he turned to face her fully. I meant every word, he said quietly. Every single word, Clara. You shouldn't have said those things. Margaret Caldwell holds your banknote. She could what? Destroy me? Lucas laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm already facing destruction. At least this way, I face it with my honor intact and the woman I care for by my side. Clara's breath caught. The woman you care for, yes. He took her hand. I should have said it better, should have courted you properly first. But Margaret forced my hand, and I won't apologize for defending you. Lucas, you could have any woman. Why would you choose someone broken like me? Pain flashed across his face. He cupped her cheek with his free hand, his touch achingly gentle. You're not broken, Clara Hayes. You're the wholest person I've ever known. Your leg is just a leg. It doesn't define you any more than the scar on my back defines me. You have a scar? From a ranch accident 5 years ago. Does knowing that make me broken in your eyes? Of course not. Then why would your leg make you broken in mine? His thumb brushed her cheekbone. I admired your courage the moment I saw you standing in that rain, chin up despite everything. Every day since, I've found more to admire. Your kindness to everyone, your dedication to work, the way you read books by lamplight and hum when you think no one's listening. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. You walked right into my heart, Clara Hayes, limp and all, and I don't want you to ever walk out. Then he kissed her, soft at first, hesitant, asking permission. When Clara's hand came up to his shoulder, he deepened the kiss, pouring everything he couldn't say into the gentle pressure of his lips. They broke apart slowly. Lucas rested his forehead against hers. I can't promise you wealth. In 6 weeks, I might lose everything I own. But I can promise you this. I will see you, truly see you, for the rest of my life. And I will love every part of you exactly as you are. Clara's tears flowed freely now. I love you too. God help me. I love you so much it terrifies me. They held each other there in the buggy on the edge of Silverton, while the sun climbed higher and the world kept turning. Nothing was solved. The debt still loomed. Margaret Caldwell was surely already plotting revenge. The future remained desperately uncertain. But for this moment, they had each other. And somehow that felt like enough. As they rode back to Iron Creek, the mountains rose around them like cathedral walls, ancient and implacable. Clara leaned against Lucas's shoulder, feeling his arm around her, and thought about strength. Real strength wasn't being born perfect. It was standing up after life knocked you down. It was walking forward with an uneven gait and refusing to let that stop you. It was loving someone even when the world said you shouldn't. Lucas had seen that in her from the beginning. He'd looked past the limp and seen her heart. Now she just had to believe what he saw, had to trust that love really could be enough, even when everything else was falling apart. The ranch came into view, solid and enduring. Home. For however long they had it. Whatever happens, Clara said softly, I'm not going anywhere. Lucas's arm tightened around her. Good, because I'm not letting you go. Behind them, storm clouds were already gathering on the horizon, but for now the sun still shone. And sometimes that was all the hope you needed. The week following the church social brought a subtle shift to Iron Creek Ranch. Lucas no longer hid his attention. He'd seek Clara out in quiet moments, stealing a few words between the demands of ranch work. Sometimes he'd simply stand in the kitchen doorway, watching her work with an expression that made her heart flutter. The ranch hands noticed, of course, men who spent their days in each other's company developed keen eyes for change. But their teasing was gentle, approving. Clara had proven herself in their eyes, and if the boss wanted to court the cook, well, she'd earned that too. One evening, Lucas appeared with 2 horses saddled. Can you spare an hour? He asked. Clara wiped her hands on her apron. Mrs. Fletcher had already begun preparations for supper, and the afternoon stretched long and golden before them. I think I might manage that. He helped her mount the gentler mare, then led her up a winding trail that climbed the eastern ridge. The path was rough but passable, and Clara found herself growing more comfortable in the saddle with each passing minute. Lucas rode close beside her, ready to help, but never assuming she needed it. At the summit, he reined in. The view stole Clara's breath. The entire valley spread below them like a painting. Iron Creek wound through the pastures, catching the late sun in flashes of silver. The ranch buildings looked small and tidy from this height, smoke rising from the main house chimney in a straight gray line. Beyond, the mountains marched toward the horizon in waves of blue and purple, their peaks still crowned with snow. My father brought me here when I was 12, Lucas said, his voice soft with memory. Said this land would get into my blood, become part of who I was. I didn't understand then. I do now. Clara could see how it would happen. The sheer beauty of it, the way the light changed by the hour, painting new colors across the same eternal landscape. The silence that wasn't really silence at all, but filled with wind and bird song and the distant lowing of cattle. It must terrify you, she said quietly, the thought of losing it. Lucas's jaw tightened. He didn't answer immediately, his gaze fixed on the valley below. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Clara's chest ache. Not as much as losing you would. The words hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. Clara turned in her saddle to look at him directly. Lucas, you barely know me. We've had a few conversations. One kiss. You can't possibly what? Love you? He met her eyes. I'm 32 years old, Clara. I know what I feel. I've known since that first night when you sat with me over coffee and talked about dreams you'd lost. I saw who you really are, and I haven't been able to stop seeing you since. Clara's throat tightened. But I'm not the woman you need. A rancher's wife has to be strong, capable of hard work. She has to. You work harder than anyone I know. You're up before dawn, on your feet all day, and I've seen you sewing by lamplight when you should be sleeping. If that's not strength, I don't know what is. But my leg. Lucas swung down from his horse and came to stand beside her mare. He looked up at her, his blue eyes intense. Your leg is part of you. I won't pretend it isn't there, won't tell you it doesn't matter. It matters because everything about you matters. But it doesn't make you less. It makes you who you are. The woman brave enough to travel 800 miles alone. The woman who stands up to Margaret Caldwell. The woman I love. Clara slid from her saddle and Lucas caught her, steadying her. For a moment they stood close, the wind carrying the scent of pine and sage around them. I love you too, Clara whispered. So much it frightens me, because losing you would destroy me. Then we won't lose each other. Lucas pulled her close and she rested her head against his chest, hearing his heart beat steady and strong beneath her ear. Whatever comes, we face it together. They stood that way for a long time, watching the shadows lengthen across their valley, memorizing this moment of peace before the storm. Clara's secret sewing continued, though now she felt Lucas's knowledge of it like a physical presence. She couldn't save his ranch with needle and thread, but she could show him he wasn't alone. Every penny she saved was a penny he didn't have to find elsewhere. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Mrs. Fletcher tried to stop her. You'll make yourself sick, child. You're already working yourself to the bone. I have to help, Clara insisted, threading another needle by lamplight. I have to. The older woman sighed, recognizing the futility of argument. At least let me sit with you, keep you company. So they worked together in the evenings, Fletcher mending and Clara taking in whatever jobs the town women would give her. Dresses altered, shirts repaired, a wedding dress that needed intricate beadwork. The work was exacting, and Clara's eyes burned from the close focus, but she persisted. In 3 weeks, she saved $47. It felt like both a fortune and an insult. $47 against a $2,000 debt. Less than 3% of what Lucas needed. The deadline crawled closer. July 15th. 8 weeks away, now 7, now 6. Then Margaret Caldwell made her move. The sheriff arrived on a Tuesday morning with 2 men Clara didn't recognize. One wore an expensive suit and carried a leather satchel. A lawyer, clearly. The other was Margaret herself, dressed in black silk despite the warm spring weather. Lucas met them on the porch, his face carefully neutral. Clara watched from the kitchen window, her hands clenched in her apron. "Mr. Brennan," the lawyer began, his voice carrying the nasal precision of Eastern education, "I represent Mrs. Margaret Caldwell in a matter of some legal complexity. May we speak inside? Anything you have to say can be said out here." The lawyer looked uncomfortable, but Margaret's expression was triumphant. She nodded to the man who cleared his throat and withdrew papers from his satchel. "It has come to Mrs. Caldwell's attention that your father, God rest his soul, never properly filed water rights to Iron Creek. The original claim was filed by Mrs. Caldwell's late husband in 1852, 3 years before your father's homestead application." Lucas went very still. Clara knew that stillness now. It meant he was containing fury that would frighten most men. "My father homesteaded this land legally under the Homestead Act of 1862. Water rights were assumed to be included." "Assumed, yes, but never formally documented." The lawyer produced more papers. "According to Colorado territory law, water rights must be filed separately. Without that filing, the rights default to the original claimant or their heirs. Let me see those documents." The lawyer handed them over. Lucas studied each page carefully, his expression growing darker. Clara could see the trap closing around him, could see the careful legal work that had gone into this. "These papers claim my father knew about the prior claim. That's a lie." "Truth or lie, the documentation is in order." Margaret stepped forward, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Of course, I'm willing to be reasonable. Sign over the north 200 acres and the water rights, and we can forget this unfortunate misunderstanding. That land is a quarter of my ranch. Without the water access, the rest is worthless. Then perhaps we can discuss alternative arrangements." Margaret's smile was cold. "I'm prepared to purchase Iron Creek in its entirety, $15,000. Quite generous, I think. The ranch is worth 3 times that. Not if you can't water your cattle, it isn't." Margaret gestured to the lawyer. "You have 30 days to respond to our claim. After that, I'll file with the territorial court. Legal fees alone will cost you $500 or more. Where will you find that kind of money, Mr. Brennan? You can't even pay your bank note." She let that sink in, watching Lucas's face. When he didn't respond, she nodded with satisfaction. "Think about my offer. It's more than fair, and it's the only way you'll walk away from this with anything at all." They left in a swirl of expensive fabric and legal papers. Lucas stood on the porch long after they disappeared down the road, the documents clenched in his fist. Clara came out to him, not speaking, just standing close. He looked at her, and the naked pain in his eyes made her want to crumble. "She's going to take everything," he said. "The ranch, the land, even the water. Everything my father built, everything I've worked for. Gone. We'll fight her." "With what? I don't have $500 for a lawyer. I barely have $2,000 for the bank. And even if I beat her in court, it'll take months, years maybe. The bank won't wait." Clara took his hand, feeling the tremor in his fingers that he was trying to hide. "Then we find another way. We always find another way." But for the first time since she'd known him, Lucas looked defeated. The blow came from an unexpected direction. Clara was in Morrison's store 3 days later, purchasing flour and sugar, when the door opened and a woman entered. She was perhaps 28, beautiful in a way that made Clara's stomach clench. Auburn hair swept up in an elaborate style. A dress of green silk that probably cost more than Clara earned in 6 months. Skin like porcelain, unmarked by sun or hardship. And she moved with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned her place in the world. "Clara Hayes?" The woman's voice was cultured, Eastern. She approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I've heard so much about you. I'm Catherine Miller." The name hit Clara like a fist. Catherine Miller, the woman who'd rejected Lucas 5 years ago. The woman Mrs. Fletcher had mentioned in passing. The one who couldn't bear the isolation of ranch life. "Miss Miller," Clara managed, her voice steady despite the alarm bells ringing in her head. "Please call me Catherine. We're going to be seeing quite a bit of each other, I think." Catherine's gaze swept over Clara, lingering pointedly on her leg. Lucas always did have a soft heart for charity cases. The words were delivered with a smile, making them somehow worse than Margaret's open hostility. This was poison wrapped in honey. If you'll excuse me, Clara said, gathering her parcels. Of course, I'm sure you have work to get back to. Lucas always did run that ranch like a military operation. Catherine paused at the door. Tell him I'm staying at the boarding house. I'd love to see him. We have so much to catch up on. Clara paid for her supplies with hands that wanted to shake. She managed to reach the buggy before her composure cracked. Catherine Miller. Here. Now. The woman who'd broken Lucas's heart. That evening, Clara forced herself to mention it casually as she served supper. I met Catherine Miller in town today. She said to tell you she's here. Lucas's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Something flickered across his face, too quick for Clara to read. Catherine's here? At the boarding house, she said. Around the table, the ranch hands suddenly found their plates fascinating. Clearly, they all knew the story. Ethan watched his brother with worried eyes. I see, Lucas said finally. He set down his fork, his meal apparently forgotten. Thank you for telling me. He excused himself shortly after, disappearing into his office. Clara finished serving mechanically, her mind spinning. Why was Catherine here? After 5 years, why now? Later, she found Lucas on the porch, staring at nothing. You should talk to her, Clara said, though the words cost her. I don't want to talk to her. But you loved her once. I thought I did. Lucas turned to face Clara. I was 27, still young enough to confuse wanting with loving. Catherine was beautiful, educated, everything I thought I wanted in a wife. When she rejected me, it felt like the end of the world. What changed? I did. His voice was quiet but certain. I stopped looking for someone perfect and started seeing people as they really are. Imperfect, complicated, real. He reached for Clara's hand. Catherine was a dream, your reality, and reality is so much better. Clara wanted to believe him, but doubt crept in like fog. Catherine Miller was everything Clara could never be. Whole, beautiful, refined. If Catherine had changed her mind, if she was here to reclaim what she'd rejected, could Lucas really choose the crippled cook over perfection? Margaret Caldwell's invitation arrived on embossed paper, delivered by a boy from town. A gathering at her home to welcome Catherine Miller back to Silverton, and Mr. Lucas Brennan was specifically requested to attend. Lucas threw the invitation in the fire. You should go, Clara said, hating herself for saying it but knowing it was necessary. Margaret, hold your banknote. This might be a chance to negotiate. It's a trap. Probably, but what choice do you have? Lucas studied her face. Come with me, please. I don't want to face that alone. So Clara found herself once again wearing her best dress, once again stepping into a world that didn't want her. Margaret's house was the largest in Silverton, a monument to wealth that seemed designed to make visitors feel small. The parlor was crowded with town's elite, the banker and his wife, the mayor, several ranchers whose spreads rivaled Iron Creek. And at the center of it all, Catherine Miller, holding court like a queen returned from exile. She wore a dress of midnight blue that made her auburn hair glow like burnished copper. A ruby necklace at her throat probably cost more than most people earned in a year. She was laughing at something the mayor said, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Then she saw Lucas, her expression transformed, becoming soft and wistful. She moved through the crowd toward them with practiced grace, and Clara felt every eye in the room turn to watch. Lucas, Catherine's voice carried longing like a melody. It's been so long. Catherine. Lucas's tone was polite but distant. His hand found Clara's waist, pulling her close against his side. This is Miss Clara Hayes. Clara, Catherine Miller. We've met. Catherine's smile was perfect. Though I understand congratulations might be in order, or are the rumors premature? What rumors would those be? Lucas asked. That you're courting your cook. Catherine's laugh was light, musical. I told Margaret that couldn't possibly be true, not seriously anyway. You always had such refined taste. Clara felt the barb land. Beside her, Lucas went rigid. My taste has matured, he said, each word deliberate. I prefer substance over surface now, character over appearance. Catherine's smile faltered slightly. Of course. I didn't mean to imply. She touched Lucas's arm, and Clara had to fight the urge to pull him away. Could we speak privately? Just for a moment. There's so much I need to say to you. Anything you need to say, you can say in front of Clara. It's all right, Clara heard herself say. I should check on the refreshments anyway. She extracted herself from Lucas's grip before he could protest. The parlor suddenly felt suffocating. Clara limped toward the doors that led to Margaret's garden, needing air, needing space. Behind her, she heard Catherine's voice rise with practiced emotion. Lucas, darling, I made such a terrible mistake. The garden was elaborate, all manicured hedges and imported roses. Clara found a bench in a shadowed corner and sat, pressing her hands against her churning stomach. This was her nightmare. Watching Lucas with a woman who was everything Clara could never be. Voices drifted through the open window above a ton, women's voices, Margaret and Catherine, speaking with the casual cruelty of those who'd never known hardship. Keep him distracted, Margaret was saying. Make him remember what he's missing. Meanwhile, I'll make sure that crippled girl knows her place. She's nothing, Catherine replied. A passing fancy. Lucas will see reason once he remembers what real love feels like, what a real woman can offer him. Clara's hands clenched into fists. Part of her wanted to march back inside, to face them down. But a larger part whispered that they were right. She was nothing compared to Catherine. A broken girl playing at being enough for a man like Lucas Brennan. Maybe leaving would be the kindest thing. Margaret would drop her legal threats if Lucas chose Catherine. The bank might extend his note if he married into money. Clara was the obstacle standing between Lucas and salvation. She stood, preparing to slip away into the gathering dusk. She'd find her way back to town, pack her things, disappear before she could destroy the man she loved. Then Lucas found her. He stood in the garden doorway, backlit by the parlor lights, and the expression on his face stopped Clara's heart. Not anger, not frustration, just profound, aching tenderness. Clara, wait, please. She turned, ready to run, ready to save him from herself. But Lucas was already moving, crossing the garden in long strides. He reached her, and without hesitation, he dropped to his knees in the dirt. The gesture stunned her. Lucas Brennan, proud rancher, kneeling before the crippled cook, humbling himself before God and anyone watching. Stop, he said, taking her hands. Just stop running from this, from us. Lucas, get up. People will see, let them see. His voice was fierce, his eyes locked on hers. Let the whole damn town see. I don't care. But Catherine is everything I'm not. She's beautiful, whole, refined. She can give you things I never could. You're right, Lucas said, and Clara's heart shattered. Then he continued, she can give me a life of comfort and ease, social status, invitations to parties I don't want to attend, conversations about things that don't matter. His hands tightened on hers. But you, Clara Hayes, you give me everything that does matter. You give me honesty, courage, a love so fierce you'd work yourself sick to save a ranch that isn't yours. You give me someone who sees me, truly sees me, not just what I own or what I can provide. But your ranch, to hell with the ranch. The words burst from him, raw and desperate. If I lose it, I'll start over. I'll work someone else's land if I have to. I'll rebuild from nothing. But I can't rebuild if I lose you. Don't you understand? Catherine was a boy's dream of what love should be. You're a man's understanding of what love is. Tears streamed down Clara's face. I'm afraid, I'm so afraid of not being enough. Then let me tell you what I see when I look at you. Lucas's voice gentled, became almost reverent. I see a woman who traveled 800 miles alone with $50 in hope. I see someone who works 15-hour days without complaint. I see a person who saves money in secret to help a man she barely knows. I see strength, real strength, the kind that's tested and proven, not just assumed. He cupped her face with his calloused hands. I don't want perfect, Clara. Perfect is boring. Perfect is brittle. I want real. I want flawed. I want someone who knows what hardship tastes like and keeps walking anyway. I want you. Every uneven step, every doubt, every beautiful, complicated part. Clara couldn't speak, could barely breathe. I'm going to save this ranch, Lucas continued. I don't know how yet, but I will. And when I do, I'm going to ask you to marry me properly. But I need to know something first. His voice cracked slightly. If I ask, will you say yes? Through her tears, Clara found her voice. Yes, God help me, yes. Always yes. Lucas surged to his feet and kissed her. Deep and desperate, pouring 5 years of loneliness and a lifetime of longing into the press of his lips against hers. Clara wrapped her arms around his neck, kissing him back with everything she had, everything she was. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Clara Hayes. Your kindness, your courage, your spirit. I love how you hum when you cook. I love how you lose yourself in books. I love that you tried to save my ranch with needle and thread. I love all of you, exactly as you are. I love you too, Clara whispered. So much it terrifies me. They held each other in Margaret Caldwell's garden while the party continued inside, oblivious to the declaration that had just taken place under the stars. Above them, clouds gathered. The air held the electric tension of a coming storm. Inside, Catherine would be waiting. Margaret would be plotting. The banknote would still come due. The water rights fight would continue. Nothing was solved, but for this moment, Lucas and Clara had each other. And somehow, wrapped in his arms under the night sky, Clara finally believed it might actually be enough. The confrontation came the next morning. Ethan appeared in the kitchen while Clara was preparing breakfast, dressed for riding despite the dark clouds massing over the mountains. His face held a determination Clara had never seen before, mixed with something that looked like desperation. I'm going after that stallion today, he announced. Lucas, who just entered for coffee, went still. Storm's coming. Wait until tomorrow. I can't wait anymore. Ethan's voice was tight with frustration. I need to do this, need to prove I can. Prove what? That you're reckless? That I'm not living in your shadow? The words burst out, raw and angry. You know what everyone says? Lucas's little brother. Lucas took care of him. Lucas runs everything. I'm 24 years old and people still see me as a child because you won't let me make my own choices. Lucas's jaw clenched. I'm trying to keep you safe. I don't need you to keep me safe. I need you to trust me. Ethan grabbed his hat from the hook. That stallion's been out there for 3 years. Every cowboy in the territories tried to catch him. If I can do it, then what, you'll finally feel like a man? Lucas's voice was hard. Ethan, this isn't about the horse. This is about you running from something instead of facing it. And what are you running from? Ethan shot back. Oh wait, you don't run. You just carry the weight of the world on your shoulders and act like you're the only one strong enough to handle it. The tension between them was thick enough to cut. Clara wanted to intervene to somehow fix this, but she understood instinctively that this was old pain, old patterns that had nothing to do with her. If you go out in this storm and get hurt, or worse, Lucas said quietly, I'll never forgive you. That's my choice to make, not yours. Ethan headed for the door. For once, just once, let me make my own mistakes. He left before Lucas could respond. The kitchen fell into heavy silence. Clara touched Lucas's arm. Let him go. He could die out there. He could, but he's right. You can't protect him forever. She squeezed his hand. He's your brother, not your son. You raised him, yes, but he's grown now. He needs to find his own way. Lucas closed his eyes, pain etched in every line of his face. If something happens to him, we'll face it, together. But even as she said it, Clara felt dread pooling in her stomach. The storm clouds looked wrong, too dark, moving too fast. And Ethan had ridden out with anger driving him, not caution. By afternoon, the storm hit with unprecedented fury. Rain hammered the roof like bullets. Wind screamed around the corners of the house, testing every board and shingle. Lightning split the sky in jagged scars, and thunder followed close enough to rattle the windows. The ranch hands secured animals and equipment, then retreated to the bunkhouse. Mrs. Fletcher and Clara prepared extra coffee, knowing no one would sleep until the storm passed. Hours crawled by. 4 o'clock, 5, 6. Ethan didn't return. At 7, with darkness falling and the storm showing no signs of weakening, Lucas stood. His face was gray with worry, but his movements were decisive. I'm going after him. Not alone, Jake, the foreman protested. Take some of the men. The men are needed here. The south fence is already down. If the cattle scatter... Lucas pulled on his oilskin coat, grabbed his rifle. I know where he'd go. The North Ravine is where that stallion runs. I'll find him. Clara followed him onto the porch, rain immediately soaking her dress. Please be careful. Lucas turned, pulled her close, kissed her hard. I'll bring him back. I promise, mind it. Then he was gone, swallowed by the storm. Clara stood on the porch long after he disappeared, rain streaming down her face, mingling with tears. Mrs. Fletcher came out, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders. Come inside, child. Standing out here won't bring them back faster. But Clara couldn't move. Somewhere in those mountains, the two men she loved most in the world were in danger, and she was powerless to help. 10 o'clock, 11. Midnight approached. Clara sat in the kitchen, ostensibly mending clothes, but really just stabbing the needle through fabric again and again, barely seeing what she worked on. Mrs. Fletcher sat across from her, working on a quilt square, her normally steady hands trembling slightly. The ranch hands came in periodically for coffee, their faces grim. The storm was worsening, not improving, temperature dropping, wind strong enough to knock a man off his horse. At midnight, they heard it. Hoofbeats. Clara was on her feet and through the door before conscious thought. Mrs. Fletcher closed behind. Jake appeared from the bunkhouse with a lantern, several other hands following. Through the rain, a horse materialized. Lucas's bay gelding, but carrying two riders. As they came closer, Clara's heart stopped. Lucas rode behind, supporting a limp form draped across the saddle in front of him. Ethan, covered in blood, unconscious or worse, so still Clara couldn't tell if he was breathing. Get him inside. Lucas's voice was hoarse from hours of shouting over the storm. He's alive, but barely. Someone ride for the doctor. Now. They carried Ethan into the house, laying him on the dining table. In the lamplight, Clara could see the extent of it. His right leg bent at a wrong angle, clearly broken. A deep gash across his forehead bled steadily, despite the makeshift bandage Lucas had tied. His face was gray, his breathing shallow. What happened? Mrs. Fletcher was already bringing hot water, clean cloth. Found him at the bottom of the North Ravine. Lucas was soaked to the skin, shaking either from cold or shock. His horse is dead. Looks like it spooked. Threw him. He hit rocks on the way down. I had to carry him up the slope. Took 2 hours. The doctor wouldn't arrive until morning at the earliest, not in this storm. Clara assessed Ethan's injuries with a practiced eye, her mother's training rising to the surface. The head wound was serious, but the broken leg was the immediate threat. If not set properly, infection could set in. I can help, she said. Lucas looked at her, desperate. How? My mother was a midwife and healer. I learned medicine from her, helped deliver babies, treat injuries. I never mentioned it because women doctors aren't accepted. But right now, I'm all Ethan has. She didn't wait for permission. I need clean water, whiskey for disinfectant, needle and thread, and wooden slats for a splint. Mrs. Fletcher moved immediately, gathering supplies. The ranch hands hovered nearby, uncertain but willing to help. Lucas stood frozen, watching Clara transform from his gentle Clara into someone else entirely. Someone confident and capable, and absolutely certain. Clara examined the head wound first. Deep, but the skull was intact. She cleaned it thoroughly with whiskey, making Ethan moan even in unconsciousness. Then she threaded a needle and began to stitch, her hands steady despite the stakes. 12 stitches, small and even. When she was done, she bound the wound with clean cloth. The leg is worse, she said, examining the break. The bone needs to be reset. It's going to hurt him, even unconscious. Do what you need to do, Lucas said. Clara positioned herself at Ethan's leg. Hold his shoulders. Keep him from moving. Lucas and Jake gripped Ethan firmly. Clara took a breath, said a silent prayer, and pulled. The crack of bone realigning made everyone in the room flinch. Ethan screamed, his body convulsing despite being held. Then he went limp again. Clara worked quickly, splinting the leg with wooden slats, binding it tight. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, years of watching her mother work manifesting in muscle memory she hadn't known she possessed. Finally, she stepped back. He needs to be watched. Brain injuries can worsen suddenly. Wake him every 2 hours if you can. Watch for seizures, vomiting, pupils dilating unequally. She swayed slightly, exhaustion and stress catching up. Lucas caught her, held her steady. "You saved him," he said, wonder in his voice. "You saved my brother's life." "I did what needed doing," Clara replied. But her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline fading. Mrs. Fletcher guided her to a chair. "Sit before you fall. I'll make tea." The night stretched long. Clara and Lucas took turns watching Ethan, waking him when they could, monitoring his breathing. By dawn, his color was better. His pupils responded normally to light. The immediate danger had passed. The doctor arrived mid-morning, the storm finally broken. He examined Ethan thoroughly, checked Clara's stitching and splinting. "Excellent work," he said, surprise evident. "Where did you learn such skills?" "My mother taught me." "She taught you well." "The boy will live, thanks to you. The leg will heal straight. The head wound should scar, but won't leave permanent damage." He looked at Clara with new respect. "You have a gift, young woman. It's a shame you're not a man. You'd make a fine physician." After he left, Lucas sat beside Ethan's bed. His brother slept peacefully now, the crisis past. Clara stood in the doorway watching them. "Thank you," Lucas said without looking up. "I couldn't bear to lose him. He's all the family I have left." "I know." Clara came to stand beside him, resting her hand on his shoulder. "He's going to be fine." Lucas turned his head, pressed a kiss to her hand. "You're extraordinary. Do you know that? Absolutely extraordinary." Clara didn't feel extraordinary. She felt wrung out, exhausted, but she'd done what needed doing, and that had to be enough. Ethan woke properly that evening. His first word was, "Lucas, I'm here." Lucas was at his side instantly. "How do you feel?" "Like I fell off a mountain." Ethan tried to smile, winced at the pain in his head. "Did I catch the stallion?" "No, you damn fool. You nearly got yourself killed." "Did you have to tell me that while I'm already injured?" But there was affection in Ethan's voice, and relief. The anger between them had burned away in the crucible of near death. Over the next few days, as Ethan recovered, the truth emerged. Clara caught Lucas and Jake examining something in the barn, their faces grim. She approached quietly. "What is it?" Lucas held up a length of wire. Barbed wire, still kinked from being stretched tight. "Found this near where Ethan fell. Someone strung it across the trail." Clara's blood ran cold. "Someone put it there deliberately?" "At neck height for a horse. If the animal hits it at full gallop." Jake shook his head. "That's not an accident. That's attempted murder." "But who would—" Then Clara understood. "Margaret." "Can't prove it," Lucas said, jaw tight with fury. "But the wire's not from our stock. Different gauge, different manufacturer. And the only other person who's bought wire in Silverton recently is Margaret's foreman." "That trail," Jake added. "You ride it most mornings, boss. Check the north fence line. Ethan only took it because he was chasing that stallion." The implication hung heavy. Someone had tried to kill Lucas. Ethan had nearly died in his place. Lucas confronted Margaret's foreman, Donovan, in town the next day. Clara heard about it from the shopkeeper, who'd witnessed the scene. "Mr. Brennan backed Donovan against the saloon wall," Morrison reported, eyes wide. "Told him if he or anyone else touched his family again, proof wouldn't matter." The look in his eyes? I've never seen Lucas Brennan that angry. But Margaret had plausible deniability. She claimed to know nothing about the wire, suggested it was probably old fencing that had broken loose in the storm. The sheriff, clearly in her pocket, declined to investigate further. Then Margaret herself visited Iron Creek. She claimed to be checking on Ethan's recovery, but her real purpose became clear quickly. Clara was in the kitchen when she overheard the conversation in Lucas's office. "I'm prepared to be generous," Margaret was saying. "Forgive your entire bank debt. $2,000 erased. Drop the water rights dispute. All of it. In exchange for what? Sign over Iron Creek to me. I'll hire you as foreman at $50 a month. You can stay on the land you love, just without the burden of ownership." There was a long pause. Clara held her breath. And you end your association with that crippled girl. She's clearly a distraction you can't afford." Clara's hands clenched on the counter. She waited for Lucas's answer, knowing it would define everything. "Get off my land, Margaret. You have 6 weeks until foreclosure." Where will you find $2,000? I'll find a way. There is no way. I've made sure of that. No one in Silverton will lend to you. No one will buy your cattle at fair price. I own this town, Mr. Brennan, and soon I'll own your ranch. We'll see about that. After Margaret left, Clara found Lucas on the porch, staring at the valley below. She didn't speak, just stood beside him. She's right, he said finally. I don't have a way out. 5 weeks, and it's over. Then we'll start again, somewhere else. Lucas looked at her, eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. I don't want somewhere else. This is home. My father's buried on that hill. My mother's rose garden is behind the house. Every fence post, every building I put my blood into, and I'm going to lose it all. Clara took his hand. Not if I have anything to say about it. But even as she said it, she didn't know how to make it true. $2,000 might as well be $2 million. An impossible sum. An impossible dream. Inside, Ethan was recovering, growing stronger each day. One afternoon, while Clara changed his bandages, he spoke quietly. I've been selfish, he said. Jealous of Lucas my whole life. He's perfect, you know. Strong, responsible, everything I'm not. I tried to prove myself by catching that stallion. Nearly got killed instead. You're not dead, Clara pointed out, and you're healing. Because of you. Ethan caught her hand. Thank you for saving me, for loving my brother, for seeing that he needed someone who could match his strength with their own. After he was strong enough to move around with crutches, Ethan made an announcement. I'm selling my horses. Should get $400 or $500. Ethan, no, Lucas protested. Those are your breeding stock. You saved my life. Clara saved it twice. This is how I repay you. Ethan's voice was firm. Besides, I've decided. When I'm healed, I'm going to California. Start fresh out there. Build my own operation, away from your shadow. But first, I help save the ranch. It's the least I can do. The offer was generous. $400 was a significant sum. Combined with Clara's savings and what Lucas could scrape together, it brought them to perhaps $1,500. Still $500 short. Then Mrs. Fletcher approached them, her face set with determination. I have something to tell you both, she said. She led them to her room, opened a trunk, and withdrew a bank book. Inside, the deposit showed 20 years of careful saving. The final balance, $2,000. My daughter died young, Mrs. Fletcher said, her voice thick. Before she could marry, before she could use the dowry I'd saved. I kept it all these years, couldn't bear to spend it. But I can't take it with me, and you two, you remind me what love should look like. She pressed the bank book into Lucas's hands. Take it. Pay the bank. Save Iron Creek. Lucas shook his head, tears streaming down his weathered face. I can't. It's your life savings. And what good is it to an old woman with no family? You've given me a home here, treated me with kindness. Let me give you a future. We'll pay you back, Lucas said. Every penny, with interest, I swear it. Pay me back by living well, by building a family here, by proving that good people can still win. Clara wrapped her arms around the older woman, sobbing into her shoulder. This was what community meant, what family meant. Not blood, but choice. Not obligation, but love. That night, in the quiet of the kitchen, Lucas pulled Clara close. We're going to make it, he said, wonder in his voice. Against everything, we're actually going to make it. Clara held him tight, feeling his heart beat against hers. They had the money now. The ranch was saved. But Margaret Caldwell wasn't finished with them yet, and the hardest battle was still to come. In the distance, storm clouds gathered again. The war for Iron Creek Ranch was far from over. 3 weeks after paying the bank, Clara's body finally betrayed her. She had pushed too hard for too long. The months of stress, the endless work, the secret sewing by lamplight, all of it had taken its toll. The old scar on her twisted leg, where childhood injury had never quite healed, began to ache in a way that felt different. Wrong. At first, she ignored it. They were planning a wedding. Lucas was negotiating new cattle contracts. The ranch needed her. She couldn't afford weakness now. But ignoring an infection doesn't make it disappear. On the 4th day, while kneading bread dough, Clara felt the world tilt. She gripped the counter, breathing through a wave of dizziness. When it passed, she looked down and saw red seeping through her skirt. The scar had reopened. Mrs. Fletcher found her in her room trying to bandage the wound. The older woman took one look and went pale. "How long has it been bleeding?" "Just today. It's nothing. I'll wrap it tight and—" "That's not fresh blood, child. That wound's been weeping for days." Mrs. Fletcher's hands were gentle but firm as she examined Clara's leg. The skin around the old scar was hot to touch, angry red spreading like a stain. "You need the doctor. Now." "No," Clara pulled away. "The wedding is in 2 weeks. I won't worry Lucas with this. It's just a little infection. It'll heal." But it didn't heal. By the next morning, Clara couldn't stand without help. Fever painted her cheeks bright pink, and her leg had swollen to twice its normal size. When Lucas carried her breakfast tray and found her still in bed, his face went white. "Clara?" She tried to smile. "Just tired. I'll be up in a moment." But when she tried to rise, her leg buckled. Lucas caught her before she hit the floor. Her skin burned against his hands, and the smell of infection, sweet and sickly, hit him like a blow. "Mrs. Fletcher!" His bellow brought the housekeeper running. "Ride for the doctor. Tell him it's an emergency." The doctor arrived by afternoon. His examination was brief and grim. "Steomyelitis," he pronounced, looking at Lucas with the expression doctors reserve for death sentences. "Bone infection. It's spreading. I can see the red lines tracking up her leg." "Can you treat it?" The doctor closed his black bag slowly. "The infection is in the bone itself. At this stage, there are 2 options. Amputation above the knee, which might save her life. Or," he didn't finish. "Or she dies," Lucas said flatly. "Even with amputation, her chances are perhaps 50-50. She's weakened from overwork, and the infection has had time to spread. If it reaches her blood—" Again, that awful silence. Lucas looked at Clara, who'd fallen into fevered sleep. Her face was flushed, her breathing shallow. The woman who'd saved his brother's life, who'd worked herself sick to help save his ranch, was dying because he'd been too blind to see she was suffering. "Do the surgery," he said. "No." Clara's voice was barely a whisper, but it stopped them both. Her eyes opened, glassy with fever but determined. "No amputation. Not yet." "Clara, you'll die." "Maybe." She reached for his hand with fingers that burned. "But give me 3 days. My mother had a remedy. For infections, when nothing else worked. I've seen her save people the doctors gave up on." "Miss Hay," the doctor said gently, "folk remedies won't cure bone infection." 3 days," Clara insisted. "If I'm not better, you can cut. But give me 3 days to fight." Lucas looked at the doctor, who shook his head. Then at Clara, who gazed at him with such fierce hope that he couldn't refuse. 3 days, he agreed. "But if you get worse, then you decide." Clara squeezed his hand. "But Lucas, I need you to trust me. Trust my mother's knowledge. Can you do that?" "I trust you with my life," he said, "with everything I have." The first night was the worst. Clara's fever climbed until she was delirious, thrashing in the bed, crying out for her mother. Mrs. Fletcher and Lucas worked in shifts, following Clara's earlier instructions. Instructions she'd given while still lucid, knowing what was coming. Willow bark tea, as much as she could swallow, for the fever and pain. A poultice made from crushed garlic and honey, spread thick on clean cloth and bound to the wound. Comfrey root boiled into a bitter tea, spooned between her lips even when she fought them. And through it all, Lucas knelt beside her bed. He prayed, though he wasn't sure to whom. He held her burning hand and whispered the promises he'd been saving for their wedding. He told her about the life they'd build together, the children they'd raise, the years they'd have. "You walked into my heart," he said, his voice breaking. "You can't walk out now, not like this. Please, Clara, please stay." On the second day, Margaret Caldwell appeared at the door. Lucas met her on the porch, his face haggard. "I heard Miss Hayes is ill," Margaret said stiffly. "She's dying." The words came out flat, emotionless. Lucas had no energy left for anger. Margaret shifted uncomfortably. "I came to say, if you need to delay the wedding." "There won't be a wedding if she dies." Lucas looked at Margaret directly. "You won. Is that what you came to hear? You destroyed us after all. Just not the way you planned." For once, Margaret had no response. She left a basket of food on the porch and drove away in silence. On the third day, as dawn broke gray and cold, Clara's fever spiked higher. She convulsed, her body rigid, eyes rolling back. The doctor, who'd stayed the night, reached for his saw. "We're out of time. The infection's in her blood now. I have to take the leg." "No." Lucas's voice was quiet but absolute. "Not yet. Not while she's still fighting." He climbed into the bed beside Clara, pulled her burning body against his chest and held her. She was so hot, she was nearly glowing, and the smell of infection was overwhelming. But he didn't let go. "Clara Hayes," he said clearly, lips against her ear. "Listen to me. You're going to live. You're going to marry me. You're going to have my children and grow old in that chair on our porch. You're not going to die in this bed. Do you hear me? You're not going to die." He felt her heart hammering against his chest like a trapped bird. Too fast, dangerously fast. "Marry me," he whispered. "Right now, before God and these witnesses, I take you as my wife. In sickness and in health. With one leg or two or none at all. I take you. Clara Hayes, I take you. So you have to stay. You have to stay because you're already mine." For 10 eternal seconds, nothing changed. Then Clara took a deep, shuddering breath, and another. The terrible heat began to ease. Not quickly, but enough that Lucas felt it. Her heartbeat slowed from its frantic pace. Her breathing deepened, became less labored. By noon, the fever had broken. By evening, Clara opened her eyes. Weak, exhausted, but clear. "Lucas?" Her voice was barely audible. He pressed his forehead to hers, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I'm here. You're here. Thank God you're here. Did you just propose to me while I was dying?" Despite everything, Lucas laughed. "I did. And you can't refuse. You already said yes once." Clara's smile was tremulous but real. "Then I guess I'm stuck with you." The doctor examined her leg in amazement. The angry red lines had faded. The swelling had decreased. The wound, while still infected, was no longer spreading. "I've never seen anything like it," he admitted. "Whatever your mother's remedy was, Mrs. Brennan, it saved your life." Clara looked at Lucas, saw the exhaustion and relief and love written on his face. "No," she said softly. "He did." It took 2 more weeks for Clara to fully recover. 2 weeks of rest, of healing, of being cared for instead of caring for others. Her leg would always carry the scar, would always ache when storms came. But she kept it, and she kept her life. And when she could finally stand without help, Lucas took her hand and said, "Now about that wedding." With Mrs. Fletcher's savings and Ethan's sacrifice, Lucas paid the bank in full. The relief should have been complete, but Margaret Caldwell had one final card to play. The letter arrived 2 days before the wedding. Clara found Lucas on the porch at dawn, the paper clenched in his fist, his face carved from stone. She knew before reading it that something terrible had happened. "What is it?" Wordlessly, he handed her the letter. The paper was expensive, embossed with Margaret's initials. The words were poison wrapped in formal language. "To the citizens of Silverton and Iron Creek Valley. We, the undersigned, cannot in good conscience support the marriage of Lucas Brennan to the crippled woman Clara Hayes. Such a union degrades the moral standards of our community. Therefore we declare, no minister shall perform this ceremony. No business shall provide goods or services for this celebration. No respectable citizen shall attend or witness this mockery. Anyone who defies this decree will face social and economic consequences." Signed, 12 names followed. The bank president, the preacher, Morrison the storekeeper, 4 prominent ranchers, the mayor, the territorial judge, others whose support Lucas had counted on. Margaret had turned the entire town against them. Clara read it twice, her hands shaking. "She's trying to break us. One last time, she's trying to break us. She might succeed." Lucas's voice was hollow. "Without a preacher, we can't marry. Without Morrison's store, we can't feed our guests. Without the community's support, we don't need them." Clara crumpled the letter in her fist. "We'll marry anyway, here, at Iron Creek. Just us and the people who matter. Let Margaret have the town. We'll have each other." Lucas pulled her close. buried his face in her hair. You deserve better than this. A proper wedding with flowers and music and people celebrating, not hiding like we've done something shameful. I don't care about proper. Clara pulled back to look at him. I care about you. We could get married in a barn with chickens as witnesses, and I'd be the happiest woman alive. He kissed her then, soft and lingering. How did I get so lucky? You looked at me instead of my leg. That's all it took. That afternoon, Ethan rode to town despite his healing injuries. He visited every signatory on Margaret's letter, one by one, making his case with the passion of a man who'd nearly died and learned what truly mattered. At Morrison's store, he found the old shopkeeper behind the counter, looking miserable. I don't have a choice, Morrison said. Margaret controls half my credit. If she calls it in, then you lose your store, Ethan finished. I understand, but answer me this. Can you live with yourself? My brother gave you fair prices when you were starting out, extended credit when your wife was sick, treated you with respect when others didn't. And you're repaying that by refusing to attend his wedding? Morrison's face crumpled. I'm ashamed. God help me, I'm ashamed. But I have grandchildren to think about. Then think about what kind of man you want them to remember. The one who stood up for what's right, or the one who let fear make him cruel. At the church, Ethan found the preacher in prayer. The man looked up with haunted eyes. I've asked God for guidance, the preacher said, and all I hear is my own cowardice echoing back. Ethan told him about the wire trap, about nearly dying in Lucas's place, about Clara's healing hands saving his life. She has more Christian charity than anyone in this town, and you're refusing to marry them because of a leg? What would Jesus do, preacher? The words hung in the air between them. At the banker's house, Ethan was less gentle. My brother paid his debt in full, $2,000, Kishi, and this is how you thank him? By siding with the woman who tried to steal his land? The banker shifted uncomfortably. It's not personal, Mr. Brennan. It is personal. My brother is the best man I know. He raised me when our parents died. He's built something from nothing. And that woman, Ethan pointed in the direction of Margaret's house, has spent months trying to destroy him. If you can't see the difference between them, you're not the man I thought you were. By evening, Ethan returned to Iron Creek exhausted but satisfied. I talked to them all. Can't promise anything, but I made them think. Clara hugged him tight. Thank you. You saved my life, Ethan said simply. This is the least I can do. Meanwhile, another visitor arrived at Iron Creek. Catherine Miller stepped down from a hired carriage, her fine clothes and perfect hair looking out of place against the working ranch. Clara met her at the door, bracing for another attack. Instead, Catherine said quietly, May I speak with you? Just for a moment. They sat on the porch, the afternoon sun painting everything gold. Catherine twisted her hands in her lap, a gesture so unlike her usual confidence that Clara found herself curious despite her wariness. I came to say I was wrong. Catherine's voice was barely audible. About you, about Lucas, about everything. Clara waited. 5 years ago, I loved Lucas, or I thought I did. Catherine's eyes were distant, seeing the past. But I loved the idea of him more than the reality, the handsome rancher, the strong provider, the man who would give me security and status. When he proposed, I saw only the isolation, the hard work, the lack of refinement. So I said no and ran to San Francisco. She laughed bitterly. I thought I was so smart. Married a banker who had money and culture and all the things I wanted. Then he died, and it turned out he had debts I knew nothing about. I lost everything. Came crawling back here, thinking Lucas would be my salvation again. But he chose me, Clara said. He did. And watching you together, I finally understood what love actually looks like. Catherine met Clara's eyes. It's not about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who sees you perfectly. Lucas sees you, Clara, all of you, the way I always wanted to be seen, but was too shallow to recognize. Clara didn't know what to say. Margaret offered me money to pursue Lucas, Catherine continued, to reclaim him. I refused, and I'm going to that wedding tomorrow, consequences be damned, because you deserve to marry the man you love without people like me standing in the way. Why are you telling me this? Catherine stood, smoothed her skirts. Because I may not have had the courage to love him, but I can have the courage to let him be happy. And you make him happy in ways I never could. She left without waiting for a response. Clara watched her carriage disappear down the road, feeling something shift in her chest. Forgiveness, maybe. Or just understanding that people were more complicated than she'd thought. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the autumn air crisp with the promise of change. Clara dressed in the blue dress that Mrs. Fletcher had altered, the fabric soft against her skin. She pinned her mother's tortoiseshell comb in her hair and took a breath. No preacher, no guests, just the family she'd chosen and the man she loved. It would be enough. It had to be. Lucas waited in the aspen grove behind the house where gold leaves drifted down like blessings. He wore his best suit, his hair still damp from washing, and when he saw her, his entire face transformed with wonder. Mrs. Fletcher stood ready to read from the Bible, having volunteered to perform whatever ceremony she could manage. Ethan leaned on his crutches nearby, grinning despite everything. The ranch hands gathered in a respectful semicircle, their Sunday clothes brushed clean. Clara started toward Lucas, Ethan at her side to give her away. Her leg ached from standing, but she held her head high, refusing to let physical limitation mar this moment. Then she heard it, the sound of wagons. Everyone turned. Coming up the road was a procession of vehicles. First Morrison's wagon, the old shopkeeper at the reins with his wife beside him. Then the blacksmith's family. Then more faces Clara recognized from town. The school teacher, the doctor, 3 ranching families, and Catherine Miller, in her fine carriage, looking straight ahead with determined dignity. They kept coming, a dozen wagons, maybe more, half the town defying Margaret's decree. Morrison climbed down, his face set with determination. He approached Lucas and Clara, his voice carrying across the grove. We let fear guide us yesterday, but this young woman, he gestured to Clara, taught us what courage looks like. She came here with nothing, built a life, saved a man's life. If Margaret Caldwell wants to punish us for witnessing love, so be it. Some things are worth the cost. The crowd murmured agreement. Clara's vision blurred with tears. Then, incredibly, the preacher appeared. He wore his formal vestments, carried his Bible, and his face showed the peace of a man who'd made the right choice. I took vows to serve God and my congregation, he said, not to serve fear or money. Mr. Brennan, Miss Hayes, if you'll allow me, I'd be honored to perform this ceremony properly. Lucas looked at Clara, his eyes asking the question. She nodded, unable to speak. Please, Lucas said, we'd be grateful. The ceremony began. The preacher's voice rang out over the gathering. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of God and these witnesses to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. Clara barely heard the traditional words. She was focused entirely on Lucas, on the way his hands trembled slightly as he took hers, on the love shining in his eyes. Lucas Brennan, the preacher said, do you take Clara Hayes to be your lawfully wedded wife? Lucas's voice was strong and clear. I do, and I vow this. I will see you, truly see you every day of our lives. I will be your strength when you falter, and your partner when you're strong. I will love every part of you, every scar, every fear, every uneven step, from this day until my last breath. The preacher turned to Clara. Clara Hayes, do you take Lucas Brennan to be your lawfully wedded husband? Clara's voice shook but held firm. I do, and I vow this. I will walk beside you, uneven steps and all, through whatever comes. I will be your home when you're weary and your companion in joy. I will love you not despite our struggles, but because of them, for they made us who we are, whole together. By the power vested in me by God in the territory of Colorado, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Lucas, you may kiss your bride. Lucas pulled Clara close and kissed her, deep and tender, a promise and a celebration. Around them, the gathered crowd cheered. Aspen leaves fell like golden snow, and the mountains watched in eternal silence. When they finally broke apart, Clara whispered, "We did it." "We did," Lucas agreed. Then louder to everyone, "Thank you, all of you, for standing with us." Morrison stepped forward. "We brought food, figured you'd need it for a proper celebration." The women began unpacking baskets. Somehow they'd coordinated this, preparing a feast in defiance of Margaret's orders. Bread and roasted chicken, pies and cakes, enough to feed an army. As the celebration began, Clara noticed a carriage in the distance, stopped on the ridge overlooking the ranch. Even from here, she recognized Margaret Caldwell's profile watching the gathering below. Catherine noticed too. She excused herself and walked toward the ridge, moving with purpose. Clara watched, curious, as Catherine approached Margaret's carriage. The conversation was brief. Clara couldn't hear the words, but she saw Margaret's expression transform from triumph to shock to something that might have been grief. Catherine spoke for several minutes, gesturing toward the celebration below. Finally, Margaret's carriage turned and drove away. Catherine returned to the party, her face unreadable. "What did you say to her?" Clara asked. "That she lost, not because Lucas chose you, but because she chose fear over love, power over connection. And now she'll die alone with all her money and none of the things that actually matter." Catherine's smile was sad. "I told her I almost made the same mistake. Thank God I didn't." The celebration continued into the evening. As twilight painted the sky in purple and gold, Lucas found Clara standing at the edge of the grove, watching their friends and neighbors eat and laugh together. "What are you thinking?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "That I never imagined this." Clara leaned back against him. "I thought I'd die alone and unwanted. Instead, I'm surrounded by people who chose to stand with us, who saw past what everyone else sees first." "They learned from you," Lucas said. "You taught them what real strength looks like." Later that night, after the guests had left and the ranch had settled into peaceful quiet, Lucas carried Clara over the threshold of the small cabin Ethan had built. It stood close enough to the main house for convenience, but far enough for privacy. Inside, a fire burned in the hearth. The bed was made with fresh linens. Bookshelves lined one wall, already filled with volumes of poetry and adventure Lucas had been secretly collecting. "Welcome home, Mrs. Brennan," Lucas said, setting her gently on her feet. The name sent warmth through Clara's entire body. Mrs. Brennan. She was his and he was hers, legally and spiritually and in every way that mattered. Lucas cupped her face in his hands. "Are you nervous?" "No," Clara said honestly. "Not with you." He undressed her slowly, reverently, kissing each piece of skin as it was revealed. When he reached her twisted leg, he paused, then bent and kissed the scarred flesh. "Every part of you is beautiful," he whispered. "Not despite this, because of this, because it made you who you are." Clara pulled him to her, kissing him deeply. Their union was tender and passionate, awkward in places and perfect in others. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Lucas tracing patterns on Clara's shoulder. "Happy, Mrs. Brennan?" "More than I ever thought possible." "This is just the beginning," Lucas promised. Clara believed him. Winter came to Iron Creek with vengeance. Snow piled 6 feet deep in places, and temperatures plunged below zero. The ranch became a world unto itself, isolated but not lonely. Clara and Lucas settled into married life with surprising ease. They worked side by side during the day, Lucas teaching her about the ranch, Clara continuing to manage the kitchen. At night, they'd read by the fire, or Lucas would hold Clara while she told him stories from books, her voice soft in the darkness. One particularly brutal storm trapped them inside for 3 days. Lucas used the time to teach Clara basic reading skills she'd missed, pointing out words she struggled with, showing her how different letters combined. Clara, in turn, taught him herbal medicine her mother had passed down, showing him which plants healed and which harmed. "We're making each other better," Lucas observed one evening. "That's what love does," Clara replied. In late March, as the snow began to melt, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She told Lucas while he was working in the barn, unable to wait another moment. His reaction was everything she'd hoped for. He lifted her, spun her carefully, then set her down and dropped to his knees. He pressed his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there," he whispered. "I'm your father, and I promise to love you and protect you and teach you everything I know." Clara ran her fingers through his hair, tears streaming down her face. "Are you happy?" Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He looked up at her, terrified, thrilled, grateful beyond words. "You're giving me everything I never let myself hope for." As Clara's pregnancy progressed, Lucas became almost comically protective. He hired Sarah, a 16-year-old girl from town, to help with the cooking so Clara wouldn't overtax herself. He monitored her rest, made sure she ate enough, worried constantly about every twinge and ache. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," Clara protested after he'd carried her up the porch steps for the third time that week. "Humor me," Lucas said. "I've waited 32 years for this. Let me enjoy taking care of you." How could she argue with that? In September, with Clara 6 months along and showing significantly, Ethan announced his departure. They sat on the porch together, the three of them, watching the sun set over the valley. Ethan had healed well, his legs strong again, though he'd always carry a slight limp. Clara had joked that now they matched. "I'm leaving for California next week," Ethan said. Lucas didn't look surprised. "You're sure?" "I need to build my own dream, brother." "You built this," Ethan gestured at the ranch. "It's magnificent, but it's yours. I need something that's mine." "I understand." Lucas's voice was thick. "Doesn't mean I won't miss you. I'll visit, right often. And when that baby comes, I'm riding back to meet my niece or nephew." Ethan grinned. "Can't let you raise a child without Uncle Ethan's influence." "God help us," Lucas muttered, but he was smiling. The night before Ethan left, the brothers sat up late, drinking whiskey and talking about everything and nothing. Clara left them alone, understanding they needed this time together. In the morning, Ethan's horse was packed. He'd sold most of his possessions, traveling light toward his new life. The ranch hands gathered to see him off, slapping his back and wishing him luck. Lucas walked Ethan to his horse. The brothers embraced, holding on longer than was strictly necessary. "Thank you," Lucas said, "for everything. For growing up despite me trying to keep you a child. For helping save the ranch. For accepting Clara." "Thank you for raising me," Ethan replied. "For being both brother and father when I needed it. For showing me what a good man looks like." He turned to Clara, who stood on the porch, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "Take care of him. He needs someone strong enough to tell him when he's being an idiot." "I will," Clara promised. Ethan mounted his horse, looked back once at the only home he'd really known, then rode toward the sunrise. They watched until he disappeared into the golden light. Lucas slipped his arm around Clara. "He'll be all right." "I know," Clara said. "He's his brother's son." "Brother," Lucas corrected. "That too." November brought the first snow in Clara's labor. It started just before dawn, a tightening in her back that quickly intensified. Mrs. Fletcher took charge immediately, sending for the doctor, preparing the bedroom, boiling water. Lucas hovered, useless and terrified. "Tell me what to do." "Stay with me," Clara said, gripping his hand as another contraction hit. "Just stay with me." He didn't leave her side. Through 18 hours of labor, Lucas held her hand, wiped her forehead, whispered encouragement. The doctor arrived by mid-morning, examined Clara, and pronounced everything normal. "First babies take time," he said. "Be patient." Patience was torture. Clara's pain increased as the day wore on, and Lucas felt each cry like a knife to his heart. He'd faced down angry cattle, winter storms, financial ruin. None of it compared to watching the woman he loved suffer and being powerless to help. Finally, as dust painted the windows orange, the baby came. One final push, and suddenly there was a squalling, red-faced bundle in the doctor's hands. A boy. Perfect except for one terrible detail. He wasn't breathing. The room froze. The doctor's face went white. He turned the baby, patted his back. Nothing. Lucas felt his world ending. Not the baby. Please, God, not the baby. Then Clara spoke, her voice exhausted but clear. "Turn him. Clear his airway. Rub his back firmly." The doctor followed her instructions. For 10 eternal seconds, nothing happened. Then the baby cried. The sound was the most beautiful thing Lucas had ever heard. He started sobbing, pressing his face against Clara's shoulder while she held their screaming son. "Samuel," Clara whispered. "Samuel Lucas Brennan." The doctor checked the baby thoroughly. "He's perfect. All 10 fingers and toes. Strong lungs, clearly." He looked at Clara with respect. "You knew exactly what to do. That's the second time your knowledge has saved a life in this house." After the doctor left, Lucas sat beside the bed, holding Clara's hand while she nursed Samuel. The baby latched quickly, his tiny fist curled against her breast. "He's perfect," Lucas whispered. "You're both perfect." "We made him together," Clara said. "Half you, half me. Ours." Lucas leaned down and kissed his son's downy head. "Welcome to the world, Samuel. You're going to love it here." December brought Samuel's christening. Despite the cold and snow, people came. The community that had stood with them at their wedding wanted to celebrate the newest member of Iron Creek Ranch. Ethan rode in from California, keeping his promise. He'd been there barely 2 months, but already looked different. More confident, more settled. He swept Clara into a careful hug, mindful of her still healing body. "Let me see my nephew." Clara placed Samuel in his arms. Ethan's face transformed, becoming soft with wonder. "He looks like Lucas. Poor kid." "He has your nose," Lucas pointed out. "Then he's doomed to be devastatingly handsome." The christening was simple but meaningful. The same preacher who'd married them blessed Samuel, speaking of faith and hope and the legacy of good people. Ethan stood as godfather, promising to guide Samuel if anything happened to his parents. Then Margaret Caldwell arrived. The gathering went silent. She stood at the back, dressed in black, looking older than her years. In her hands, she carried a small box wrapped in silver paper. Lucas tensed, moving instinctively to place himself between Margaret and his family. But Margaret raised one hand, palm out. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I came to—" She paused, seeming to struggle with the words, "to apologize, and to bring a gift for the baby." She approached slowly, every eye following her. She stopped a few feet away, opened the box. Inside lay a silver rattle, clearly antique and valuable. "This was my son's," Margaret said quietly. "He died when he was 2. Scarlet fever. That was 30 years ago. I've kept it all this time, unable to bear parting with it." Her eyes met Clara's, and for the first time, Clara saw past the armor to the broken woman beneath. "You showed me grace I didn't deserve," Margaret continued. "When I tried to destroy you, you offered me a place at your table. I didn't understand then. I do now. Some things matter more than money or power." She placed the box in Clara's hands. "May your son live long and bring you joy, and may you forgive a bitter old woman who forgot what joy looked like." Clara accepted the gift, her heart aching for this woman who'd lost so much. "Thank you, Mrs. Caldwell. This means more than you know." Margaret nodded once, then turned to leave. At the door, she paused. "I'm funding a new school in Silverton, hiring teachers, including women who might have been overlooked elsewhere. I thought perhaps you might consider teaching there, Mrs. Brennan. When you're ready, your skills shouldn't go to waste." She left before Clara could respond, disappearing into the snow. Catherine Miller, who'd been watching from across the room, smiled. "She's trying. It's more than I expected." "Everyone deserves a chance to be better," Clara said. 5 years passed in a blur of seasons and small miracles. Samuel grew into a bright, energetic 5-year-old with his father's blue eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. Rose arrived 2 years after Samuel, a daughter with dark curls and a smile that could charm birds from trees. The cabin became too small, so Lucas built an addition, then another. Iron Creek Ranch prospered. Lucas expanded their herd, improved their breeding program, and gained a reputation for honest dealing that brought buyers from 3 territories. The debt to Mrs. Fletcher was repaid with interest, though she continued living with them, now as beloved grandmother rather than housekeeper. Ethan visited yearly, bringing his wife Teresa and eventually their own children. He'd built a successful horse breeding operation in California and seemed genuinely happy with the life he'd chosen. Margaret Caldwell kept her distance but kept her word. The school opened, and Clara taught there 3 days a week, working with children who struggled with reading or who needed extra attention. She never turned away a student because of poverty or disability. Catherine Miller married a rancher from Wyoming and moved away, but she wrote occasionally. Her letters spoke of contentment, of finally understanding what she'd been searching for. One autumn afternoon, as golden leaves fell like coins around them, a family arrived at Iron Creek Ranch. Thomas and Mary Green, with their 8-year-old daughter Laura. Laura had a clubfoot. She walked with a pronounced limp, and her eyes carried the haunted look Clara remembered from her own childhood. The look of someone who'd been told too often that she was broken. "We heard about your school," Thomas said to Clara. Heard you were patient with children who needed extra help. Laura struggles with reading. But more than that, she struggles with believing she's worth the effort. Clara knelt to Laura's level, ignoring the protest from her own bad leg. Hello, Laura, I'm Mrs. Brennan, but you can call me Clara. Laura stared at the ground. The other kids call me Gimp. They used to call me Cripple, Clara said matter-of-factly. Sometimes they still do when they think I can't hear. Laura's eyes widened. But you're a teacher and a mother and… She gestured vaguely at the ranch, at the obvious prosperity and respect. And I walk with a limp, Clara finished. Yes, want to know a secret? Laura nodded. The limp isn't what matters. What matters is where you're walking to and whether you let people's cruelty stop you from getting there. She led Laura to the porch where Lucas was teaching Samuel to properly hold a rope. Rose played nearby, building elaborate structures with twigs and stones. A normal family moment, except for Clara's visible limp and the way Lucas's eyes followed her with unending devotion. See that man? Clara pointed to Lucas. He's my husband, the strongest, kindest man I've ever known. When we met, I was convinced no one would ever love someone like me. What changed? Laura whispered. He looked at me. Really looked. Not at my leg first, but at my face, at my heart, at who I was inside. Clara sat on the porch steps, patted the space beside her. Laura sat, keeping her bad leg tucked close, trying to hide it. Let me tell you a story, Clara said, about a girl nobody wanted until a cowboy said she walked right into his heart. She told her story, the truth of it, the rain-soaked arrival in Silverton. Lucas's kindness when kindness was rare. The fight to save the ranch. The community that finally stood with them. The love that grew from seeing and being seen. Laura listened, eyes growing wider with each detail. The right people don't see your leg first, Clara concluded. They see your heart, your courage, your strength. And those are the only people who matter. But what if nobody ever sees me that way? Laura's voice broke. Then you see yourself that way first. Clara took the girl's hand. I spent 22 years believing I was broken. I was wrong. I wasn't broken. I was different. And different can be beautiful, if you let it. Lucas approached, having heard the end of the conversation. He knelt beside Laura, his weathered face kind. Miss Laura, can I tell you a secret? The bravest person I ever met walks with a limp. She saved my brother's life, built a home here, raises beautiful children, and she's the strongest person I know. He touched Clara's face gently. Your leg doesn't make you weak. What you do despite it makes you strong. And trust me, anyone worth knowing will see that. Laura looked between them, hope warring with fear on her young face. Then slowly she straightened her shoulders, stood taller. The change was subtle but significant. Will you teach me? She asked Clara. Not just reading, but how to be strong like you. Clara smiled. You're already strong, sweetheart. You just don't know it yet, but I'll help you learn. That evening, after the Greens had left and the children were asleep, Lucas found Clara in the kitchen. She was preparing dough for the next day's bread, her hands working the mixture with practiced ease. You were wonderful with Laura, he said. I remember being her age, believing I'd never be enough. Clara shaped the dough into a ball, covered it with cloth. If I can save even one child from that pain, it's worth it. Lucas pulled a small box from his pocket. I have something for you, was waiting for the right moment. Clara wiped her hands, accepted the box. Inside lay a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. She opened it to reveal a tiny painted portrait. Lucas, Clara, Samuel, and Rose, captured in miniature with stunning detail. Lucas, it's beautiful. When did you… Remember that traveling portrait artist last month? I commissioned this from my description. He fastened the locket around her neck. So you'll always have us close to your heart, even when we're apart. Clara touched the locket, tears pricking her eyes. I don't deserve you. You deserve everything good in this world. Lucas pulled her close, and I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it. They stood that way for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet kitchen. Through the window, stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance. The mountains stood sentinel. Iron Creek murmured its endless song. Do you ever regret it? Clara asked. Choosing me instead of someone easier? Never, not once. Lucas's voice was fierce. You're not easy, Clara Brennan. You're real. And real is so much better than easy ever could be. Clara kissed him, pouring 5 years of gratitude and love into the gesture. When they broke apart, both were smiling. Come on, Lucas said. Let's check on the children. They walked hand in hand to the house, up the stairs to where Samuel and Rose slept. Lucas tucked the blankets around his son, while Clara adjusted Rose's pillow. Simple parental gestures, repeated nightly but filled with profound meaning. This was what they'd built together. Not just a ranch, not just a home, a legacy of love that saw past surface imperfections to the beauty beneath. The scene dissolved like morning mist, and Clara found herself back on the porch of 1925. 72 years old now, her hair silver, her twisted leg more painful than ever, but still carrying her through each day. Beside her, young Lucy had stopped crying. The child sat straighter, her own twisted leg no longer something to hide. And that, sweetheart, is how your great-grandfather and I met. Lucy's voice was small but stronger than before. So Grandpa really loved you, even though you were... He loved all of me, Clara corrected gently. Not despite the limp, including it because it made me who I was. And that's what real love does. It sees the whole person. But Grandpa's gone now, Lucy said, her voice wavering. Clara touched the locket that still hung around her neck, worn but treasured. He died 2 years ago, yes, age 80. We had 50 years together. 50 years of walking side by side, uneven steps and all. She turned to face her granddaughter fully. You're not broken, Lucy. You're perfectly, beautifully whole. And someday, someone will see that. But first, you must see it yourself. How? By choosing where you walk, by walking there with your head high, by remembering that your leg is just a leg. It's not your heart, it's not your mind, it's not your courage or your kindness or your strength. Clara's voice strengthened. It's just the way you move through the world, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. Lucy looked at her great-grandmother with new eyes, seeing not a limping old woman, but a warrior who'd fought every battle and won. Will you tell me more stories, Lucy asked, about Grandpa and the ranch and everything? Every story you want to hear, Clara promised. Below them, Iron Creek Ranch spread out in the afternoon sun. Samuel ran it now with his son. Rose lived in Denver but visited often. 8 grandchildren, and now 3 great-grandchildren, carried the Brennan name and the values Lucas and Clara had built. The ranch prospered. The school Margaret had funded still operated, teaching children that different didn't mean lesser. Laura Green had grown up to become a teacher herself, passing on the lessons Clara had taught her. Everything they'd built endured. Lucy stood, and for the first time, she walked without trying to hide her limp. She moved to the porch railing, looking out at the mountains. It's beautiful here, she said. It is, Clara agreed. Your great-grandfather used to say this land gets in your blood, becomes part of you. I didn't understand at first, but I do now. She closed her eyes, feeling the afternoon sun warm on her face. In her mind, she could see Lucas as he'd been that first day, rain-soaked and serious, offering shelter without judgment, looking at her face instead of her leg. Lucas, she whispered to the wind, I kept our promise. I walked beside you for 50 years, and now I'm teaching our great-granddaughter to walk with her head high, just like you taught me. The wind carried her words away toward the mountains. Clara liked to think Lucas heard them, wherever he was. That night, after Lucy had gone home with her parents, Clara sat alone on the porch one last time. The autumn stars wheeled overhead, countless and eternal. The mountains stood dark against the sky. She touched the locket, opened it. The painted faces were faded now, worn by 50 years of constant contact, but she could still see them clearly. Lucas, strong and steady. Herself, younger and uncertain. Their children, innocent and hopeful. All the years collapsed into a single moment. She was 22 again, standing in the rain, certain no one would want her. Then Lucas was there, looking past what everyone else saw first, seeing her heart. I walked into your life with uneven steps, Clara whispered, and you welcomed everyone. A coyote called in the distance. The creek murmured its endless song. The ranch, built by determination and held by love, would stand long after she was gone. Clara closed her eyes and let herself remember. Not the pain, not the struggles, but the joy, the simple domestic moments. Lucas teaching Samuel to rope, Rose's laugh when Clara pushed her on a swing, the feeling of Lucas's arms around her every night for 50 years, the countless times he'd looked at her and seen exactly who she was, loved exactly who she was. "We did well, didn't we?" she asked the stars. "We built something that matters, not just a ranch. A legacy of seeing past the surface, of choosing courage over fear, of loving wholly and completely." The stars didn't answer, but Clara didn't need them to. She knew the truth written in the ranch that still stood, in the children and grandchildren who carried their values forward, in young Lucy who'd stopped crying and started believing. Love didn't need perfection. It just needed truth. Clara opened her eyes one last time, watching the familiar landscape she'd called home for 50 years, the mountains in their eternal patience, the valley cradling everything Lucas's father had built and Lucas had preserved. She touched the locket again. "You were right, my love," she whispered. "This was just the beginning, and what a beautiful beginning it was." The wind carried her words away, and Clara Brennan closed her eyes and slept, dreaming of rain and blue eyes and a love that had walked with her, uneven steps and all, into forever.